Jau girdėjome ne vienos šalies atstovų patirtis ir įžvalgas, o dabar metas pasidaryti į šalį, kurią mes lietuviai tikrai puikiai pažįstam. Neleisiu jums čia spėlioti, pasakysiu visai netrukus ir pati, bet labai smalsu sužinoti, kaip islandiškasis prevencijos modelis yra taikytas Airijos bendruomenėse, duomenimis pagrįstos intervencijos tėvams ir mokykloms. Taip vadinasi kitas pranešimas, o aš labai noriu pakviesti Planet Youth koordinatorių Airijoje Emmet Major.
I'm keeping you all from your lunch, I think, now, so I'll do my best to get through this on time and by past. So I'm really here, I think, to share a little bit about what we've done in our area in Ireland in terms of translating the data into practical activities and practical applications of the data in our communities, of which we've done a lot. So I'm going to cover a fair bit of ground in the next little while, and these are some of the main talking points I want to go through. So some of the modifications we've made to make this more of a fit in an Irish context, supports and resources we've been developing for schools, similarly same supports and resources that we've been developed for parents and families. And I want to talk a little bit about the importance of having local data and local trend data. And I also then want to talk about what's been quite important for us is kind of extended or leveraged additional use of that data as well. Right? So there's a fair bit to go through. Okay, most, but not all, but most of what I'm going to talk about, you'll find the resources available via that website. So you can see it there on the screen, and I expect the conference organizers will be sharing the slides, so you'll be able to get a copy there. Right? Now, just to tell you a tiny bit about where I am and what my background is. I sort of came to this a little bit. I work in the west of Ireland for an agency called the Regional Drug Task Force, and I've been with them since 2009. Prior to that, I would have worked at the other end of the spectrum to prevention, insofar as I would have dealt extensively with people in active addiction and families that had that difficulty with a loved one. And I would have worked as a counsellor, but also in a rehabilitation centre manager for quite a number of years. So it's quite a different role I have now, which is at the opposite end of the spectrum, much more in the prevention space. But you'll see there on the map, that's the map of Ireland, and my area of responsibility is that one sort of highlighted in the yellow colour. So there's 3 counties, Galway, Mayo, Roscommon. The other colours are other sites and counties now in Ireland that are adopting this type of approach and are either gathering or beginning to gather their own local data using Planet Youth surveys. Right? So we would have been the first site in Ireland, and we commenced in 2018, which I'll show you. So that's the population of my area, about 500,000 people in total, around 120,000 young people under 18. We have 90 post-primary schools or secondary schools, with 35,000, roughly 7,000 children in each school year in the region. And then we would have 450 smaller primary, or what we call national schools in Ireland. And then we have, obviously, children before school or in preschool. Okay, so it's quite a big patch, quite diverse in its way. We have, quite isolated rural farming communities, and we have, sizable enough towns and one substantial city, which is around 100,000 people, Galway City. So it's a little bit diverse, right? And quite a big geographical area also. So we started collecting Planet Youth surveys in 2018. I made first trip to Iceland, actually, myself, and to look at all of this in 2017. And I met with the sort of program originators there at Reykjavik University in quite a small room. There was only a handful of us there discussing this. And we invited them to come to Galway in 2018, and we sort of just took things from there. So it's been an iterative, I would call it an iterative developing process, tweaking, improving as we go. We've constantly been updating and adapting what we've been doing, and we've made quite substantial modifications to the questionnaire that's used. So that's been improved substantially, and the way we report it, which I'll show you. And that's been important, and it's been one of the good things really about working with the people in Reykjavik, is their willingness and adaptability and kind of the speed at which we can move. Because a lot of times you might see youth-based surveys internationally, things like HBSC or SPAD, and they're done every 4 years, and they're kind of slow, and the reporting's slow, and it's how would you say? There's nothing maybe wrong with that. It's kind of rigorous, and it's fairly, kind of rigorous academically, whereas we're a little bit more. It still is, but we're quick. We get the data out there quick, right? And that's important too. So that's been a big part of what we're doing. And then I would like to point out, actually, something that's quite important here, right, is because we started doing this initially in 2018 with a plan and funding to do 3 of these surveys, 2018, 2020, 2022. And like I say, we've been improving as we go and learning as we go. And then at the end of this, we kind of did a process evaluation and talk to our communities in the west of Ireland and see how they felt about how things were going. And the general kind of feeling was that there was a lot of promise here, and we would keep going and do a further 5-year program with 3 more surveys. And even that's quite important, because we deal with a lot of schools and a lot of principals and a lot of school management, and we've been, I'll show you in a minute, but the way we've been kind of improving and building and adding to this program, it takes a while for people to trust the process, if that makes sense. And now that schools can see that this is something that they can rely on, that's going to happen every 2 years, that they will have reliable and robust data every 2 years, they can start to now build it into their thinking and their planning. And that wouldn't have been there at the outset. So it takes a while to get people on board, I find, with this kind of stuff. And that is just an important consideration, something to bear in mind. Okay, so the sort of general discussion, if you like, I want to go through. This is an important one. So very early on, the IPM, I suppose, is well understood internationally as a substance use prevention model, or maybe a substance use demand reduction model. Sometimes you'll see it described that way. Whereas in Ireland, we very quickly move things to be much more about the health and well-being. Is that a terrible translation from Google, is it? I see a few people laughing. Maybe it is. But you see, certainly we're interested in the substance use of our young people, but we're also kind of far more focused on other things and problems that we can see in the data. And there's a lot of kind of things we could talk about here, but not enough time. So these are the kids who sit the survey. In our context, it's 15 and 16-year-olds that sit the survey in Ireland. It's not always the case, but mostly the case. That's in most communities, it's children at that age. We actually have quite a few older young people sit the survey at 17 and a few at 18. And that's sort of important as well, because we can sort of see a trajectory that they're on also. But these are the guys that we're kind of interested in, isn't it? It's the younger children. So it's not really about the kids who sit the survey. It's what can we do for the ones that are coming behind those kids. So the prevention piece. So we do quite a lot of work with our incoming parent bodies into all of our secondary schools. So these are children at 12 and 13. And in Ireland, children go from a small national school, and they're 12, they go to the big school, and it's all change, because they've gone from being, the big kid that rules the show in the school, and all of a sudden they're the little fish again in the big pond. So it's quite a transition for them. But we do quite a lot of work in that space, because that's probably one of the best and last chances parents have to get on top of things is here, right? Because very quickly from this age on and up, there's a lot more autonomy and decision making that happens with the young person will do for themselves. We also do a big, lot of work with our incoming children into national school. So these are children at 5 and 6 as they're starting into school in Ireland, typically 5 or 6 years old. They do 8 years of school in national school, and then they do 6 years of school in secondary. So one of the things we've been working on quite a bit is improving and adding to and developing high-quality, individualized, school-based reporting for all of the schools in our region. So we'd have 90 schools in total, and every single school that participates in the survey, as long as they've got more than 20 kids for anonymity reasons and also for kind of data presentation reasons. We would generate an individual hard copy report, so those go out to school management, 10 in hard copy for every school. So it's quite an undertaking, just in the printing job alone is tricky, right? But you can see the categories or chapters there: school experience, substance use, home life, leisure time, screen time, well-being indicators, sexual health, gender differences, which are substantial, and also then cross-tabulations, which show the school, the relationships in the data, which are very important as well. So the school, we would talk about the school experience of the young person. So school management can see how the children feel about being there. Do they get on with the teachers? Could they stand up for somebody that was being bullied? And on it goes. And there's always a cross-tabulation or like a reference there as what the kids in your school said compared to what everybody said. So you can see whether you're high or low for anything in particular, which is obviously very useful. And you can see there well-being indicators. That's a section that talks about sleep, about mental health, about diet, all sorts of useful information for all sorts of useful reasons. Gender difference section is here. So what's the difference between what the boys are saying and what the girls are saying? And those will be quite substantial too. And I actually, looking at the data that we have in Ireland, I'm coming around to the thinking that in some areas we might be as well, there just might be a few places we need to do gender-specific responses and not just a one-size-fits-all type stuff for everybody, because there is such a difference between what some of the boys are saying and what some of the girls are saying. But that's not currently the way things are done. But I just do think that the data is telling us something that we ought to be thinking about there. Okay, cross-tabulations here are important, and they just allow a school to make sense of the relationships between things. So a good example would be bullying for self-esteem, or maybe sleep for mental health, or hanging around after school with nothing to do for substance use, that kind of stuff. So it shows them, some of the really important relationships between categories. And it allows them then to kind of, hone in on things they could be doing as a school community, right? So this is, you can see here, this is kind of just getting towards the back of this little booklet. Now, this one actually wouldn't be available. There's a sample copy available on the website now, come to think of it, a dummy copy, an anonymous copy, because these go out to each school confidentially for use by the school management, because they'd be kind of nervous. Sometimes it might, all the kids in our school are drinking themselves senseless, and there are variations. So there could be 3 schools in one town, and the data is all very different. So things vary quite a bit from school to school, but a school principal might not want the parents seeing that. So it's up to them to decide what they want to do. But we do kind of write an overall summary, this conclusion that's not specific to the school, but the recommendations then that are done here are, you can see they're in terms of school leadership and management. There's massive applications for these reports in terms of school self-evaluation. So in Ireland, the schools are required to report to the Department of Education on what they are doing as a school to improve well-being and various other things. Well, it's teaching as well, but well-being is an examined area now. So these kind of reports allow our school principals to readily have this data to hand that they can report to the department on what's going on and what's been improving and what's not been improving and so on. So you can see how these would be a useful document to a school principal. Okay. Recommendations then under teaching and learning and how these can be applied in the classroom, and then recommendations for collaborating with stakeholders, which isn't necessarily, like the parent body is obviously one key stakeholder, but we would have schools that would use these reports to make the case for additional psychotherapy hours, for example, or a funding application for a breakfast club. How do we have, tea and toast available for kids when they arrive in the morning? Well, listen, the data saying, 20% of kids in the region aren't having a breakfast, but it's 30% in my school. So you can make that case then to the department for funding. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, so useful documents, but a lot of work has gone into making those more useful. And we have to do that because in Iceland, right, they generate school reports in Iceland that don't look like this. They have their own version. But it's very hard for them to recommend into the Irish context because they don't know what our curriculum is. They don't know what our Department of Education requires, they don't, so on and so forth. So we're the only people that can actually write recommendations. Very hard for them to do it. They can only write generalized stuff. Okay, so there's kind of a lot of other school resources that we've developed, some of which is on the website. So there's a nice kind of teaching kind of website that's used. This is used kind of around the school transition time. So that's the big step. A big challenging time in a young person's life is the move from primary school to secondary school. So there was nothing there formally, there's no standardized delivery of a school transition program. So we would have written this website, and that gets a huge amount of use during the summertime in Ireland. This is a teaching website that was developed for use in the classroom. It returns data from the survey for use in the classroom and teaching in what's called SPHE, or well-being, so social, personal health education type area. You can see there are these different topics. So what are the kids in each area? So by county, so Galway, Mayo, Roscommon have to say about mental health or cyberbullying or sexual health and screen time and so on. And it shows then, the frequencies, what the numbers were, but also then the relationships. So again, maybe the relationship between physical activity and mental health would be, to be able to dive into the data and have a look. It's a bit like, not really a dashboard, but it's a bit more kind of user-friendly than that would be. And we also kind of are in the process of developing more actual teaching modules. So these would be much more designed for use in the classroom and spelt out for teachers. So there's one up online there called The Importance of Sleep. And that it's 3 lessons around how do we convey to young people how important this is for their health in all sorts of ways, right? And but it was a gap in the national curriculum in Ireland. There wasn't really anything about the topic of sleep. So this was developed to try and address that gap and fill that gap a bit. And there's sort of three subject lessons around the topic of sleep. I'm going to play a short video here if sound will play, and we'll see. So this is developed with some of the kids in one of the local schools, something of an icebreaker. By the way, the lesson plans for that module have been downloaded about 1,000 times since it went up online last year. So that's the teaching plan. So that's teachers downloading the module to teach it in the classroom 1,000 times. So it does get a lot of use.
What's going on?
What's loud?
Hello.
Something about sleep, isn't it?
Oh, I always talk about sleep.
Yeah, same. Mum says I do. And I snore bad.
This guy can be loud. If you don't get sleep before coming, you're not going to sleep.
No.
Have the phone in the rooms.
Like, they can have their phone whenever they want, and they'll go on it all night.
Nowadays there's social media and there's TikTok especially.
I love an old podcast when I'm trying to sleep. I know, geez, not Sue Jones, you wouldn't sleep listening to them.
Well, I think if I don't get good enough sleep the night before, the next day, it's not going to be a great day. I'll be irritable, I'll be angry, I'll be sad.
15%.
50%.
I'm thinking like 40%.
50%.
I remember having around 3 hours of sleep, and I just sat down all day long.
30%?
40%.
15%.
20%.
Jeez, that's a lot.
It does affect my mental health. If I don't sleep well, I get mood swings. I'm very cranky when I don't sleep.
You get an old mood.
No, definitely, yeah. When you're on no sleep, you're in such a bad mood.
You need sleep to have energy.
It's good for your mental health.
Because you need your sleep for your energy for the entire day.
Yeah, what you say?
So that's just an example of the sort of, so there's a few other ones under development or in the process of being developed now that I won't go into, but so we do a lot in giving the schools information based on what the data is saying. Parents and family, we do a huge amount of getting high quality information out to parents at a variety of levels. So that's what the office looks like quite a lot of the time currently, working on the distribution of the of our booklet that goes out to the incoming first-year parents, and talks a bit about the project, importance of family time, talks about screen time. We've 80% of our young people with phones in their bedrooms, right? 80% with a phone in their room at night, which is nuts. I expect it's the same here, though. Right? So that's a key metric for us now that we'll be working on to try and drive that number down in the years to come. So, and that's, again, I'm not sure something that you guys would be considering or factoring into the thinking here is when you look at the data, what is it that we're trying to change? You know, what's the number we want to move? What's the dial that we want to shift? So here's one for us: 80% of phones in bedrooms. Okay, that's something we can do something about and monitor then over the next while. Similarly with alcohol use or physical activity or whatever we want to address. Okay, talks about the importance of sleep, the relationship between sleep and physical health, mental health, school engagement, right? This stuff is all very important in the Irish context to come at from this angle, because it was sort of touched on earlier that we in Ireland have alcohol is our big problem drug at this age. We have a lot of binge drinking kids, but it's very difficult to talk to a parent of a 6-year-old or an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old or even a 12-year-old about substance use, because they don't think, one, it's ever going to be their problem, so they don't perceive it as an issue or a problem that they'll have. And two, we have a societal and parental tolerance around alcohol that's very challenging to overcome. So this is why we sort of couch a lot of our approach in general health and well-being terms, incorporating substance use. Okay. We can see here the importance of hobbies and sports. Daddy was talking about this already, and monitoring that, and there's a whole kind of section of this program underway at looking into that area, and then we're looking at substance use in terms of vaping and smoking and cannabis and things like that. This is our big parental alcohol. We can see 31% of our young people drunk in the last month, at the time of the last survey last November. That hasn't improved. That hasn't improved at all, right? So, but it's not something that I'm concerned about. This is part of the long-term view that it's a slow process. And you can see their parental alcohol supply and where lots of kids drinking at home, right? Big challenge. Okay, this is the booklet that we develop and send out to our incoming junior infant parents. So again, we're bringing the same, information from the survey back to parents of children that are 5 and 6. Right, and again, a huge distribution of this happens to 7,000 incoming parents every year in 450 national schools in the region. Sleep and bedtimes here. It has the same kind of headings and chapters as the older booklet. Okay, screen time. We'd have hobbies and sports here. The importance of encouraging our young people into a wider variety of pastimes, not just one thing, right? Okay. Making changes at home if things are a little bit awry, and there's a big part of this component here around parental networking, getting parents at the outset of school to come to agreements that will improve health outcomes. And this can be in a whole variety of areas, but one of the key ones really would be around phones, mobile phones, and not giving kids phones until they leave school, leave this till they're 12 or 13. Don't be given the phones. And we have a problem there now. We can see, I think it's 36% of our children now have a phone by 11. 20% have the phone by 10. And Ilona will have a lot more data than we have on this issue. But it's marching backwards. The original time, most kids used to get a phone for their confirmation, which is they'd typically be 12 or 13. But every year, that phone is creeping back towards the cradle now, so kids are getting phones at 5, 6 and younger. And of course they'll all have tablets, whatever about the phones, they have tablets, and they're just, anyway, I won't dwell on that too much. There's a whole website that's set aside around this whole parental networking component. And we have lots of kind of schools and clusters of schools coming together to look at this sort of more preventative approach in the parent body. We do a lot of parental information nights, webinars, seminars. So that first year booklet, the one that talked about the alcohol and that particular booklet, We distribute that out to 7,000 parents every year. But not only does it just go out to the parents, there's an information night that happens in the schools that this is actually explained to them, and we do a lot of parental engagement face to face. It's not just a matter of sending them a booklet out in the post. There's a bit more to it that has to happen. Social media campaigns.
As parents and guardians of young children, you've given them direction through ground rules, advice and boundaries. When they become teenagers, though, they'll need your guidance more than ever. The Planet Youth Survey has highlighted that our teens might need a bit more support. Not getting enough sleep, excessive screen use, drinking and not enough supervised social outlets are some of the main areas that young people need our help and guidance with. For advice on how you can make a difference in your teen's life, check out planetyouth.ie.
And, okay, we have about 3 minutes left, so I'm going to rattle through this. We do high-quality, localized, area-based reporting. You can see there, those are the kind of main municipal reports. Those are available to download off the Planet Youth website. They make for interesting reading. They're quite detailed. They'd have kind of key findings, key messages, recommendations, and we could spend another half an hour talking about how you build this into planning and strategy and community planning and things like that. But it covers some of that within these documents. We can also made a lot of effort after the most recent survey to actually develop the template now for these area reports, where we can write this 52-page report down to any local area, as long as they have 2 or more schools. So let's say, for example, there was a town with 3 schools, we can generate a town-based report, or a local area-based report. So that can be useful from a policing point of view. For example, we can see there's towns where children are getting served more in the pub than other towns, and for example, it can be very useful for that kind of stuff. But there's a lot of work has to go into setting these templates up. So weeks and weeks and months, I suppose, nearly. So we did the survey in November 2024, the most recent survey, and the school reports went out. They were hit desks in March, physically desks in March. That's a quick turnaround for data. You'd be waiting 4 years for a lot of this stuff in most places, 2 anyway, whereas we're doing it in 3 months. And the area-based reports they didn't go out till, well, they were ready in May, printed in May. But I think by the time of the next survey, November 26, I should, as long as I don't go changing things too much again, I'd say we'd have the area reports, we'd be able to have the reports hitting desks in 6 weeks from time of the survey. So that's quite quick. Yeah, and just in terms of the trends, so we kind of really make quite the effort to localize these reports with imagery, so that they're not, you pin them down. So that's like one of the local famous mountain in the west of Ireland called Crowpatrick. But so anybody who picks it up, it's immediately the local Mayo report. That's very clear. Or the other one there is Lough Key, Roscommon. Immediately, it's the Roscommon report. But the trend data has been very useful. We can see there a steady march up in terms of the data on the left. That's our 4 hours or more. Excessive screen use, usually defined as 4 hours or more in the academia. So that's our, we can see every year it's just going up, 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 up with the girls and the boys. For example, the one on the right is outside after midnight rates, and on it goes. So local data is important. You're turning the kind of conversation from, anecdotal, best guess, we think this is going on, to actual evidence. You have evidence to back up what you're talking about. I won't dwell on this, but there's lots of important information in the data that's not even in the area reporting. There's really important findings in there in terms of our adolescent health that we can leverage and then use in a variety of ways. And as I said at the start, we do that whole idea of leveraging the data. So we make it available, we put it up in a data archive. Anybody can access it in Ireland for research or teaching purposes. It's likely pseudonymized now. We'd lift out school identifiers and things. But you can see here, they're extremely useful for if you want to do a local funding plan for the youth service, for example, to have the local data. What are kids saying about domestic violence in my town, right? So we need a domestic violence refuge in Roscommon. So what does the data say? Well, 12% of kids are living with domestic violence. It's very compelling then when you have that data, right? And on it goes. So there's lots of academic stuff that goes on, lots of important research that's happening, suicide prevention stuff that's going on. And we, at a local level, make this data available, not just on the data archive, but if anybody in the region that's, let's say, an interagency partner needs information for work planning or community development or whatever they want to know, we'll make it available to them as fast as we can and quickly as they can. And that's not the norm with data sets in the world of academic data. It's usually very tightly protected. So that's it. I hope you found that useful. It was just some ideas about things maybe you could use and ways you could apply the data. And lunch.